Hi, I'm Meta Spencer, and today I get the fun opportunity to have a good conversation with a longtime friend of mine, David Harries. David is a member of the Canadian Pugwash Group, and at one point was chaired the outfit that we run here in Canada, and has been very engaged in globally. And he's lived in many countries, and he has been in the military, retired military man, I think, and he's a rugby man. He likes to coach people in rugby, which means we don't really have a whole lot in common except for pugwash. But he has a concept that just made my ears flap when I thought about it. When I heard him talk about accountability, I thought, yep, that's it. Yeah, indeed. Good for you, David, because I've been trying to think of what is the underlying issue that is, to my mind, causing so much consternation, or I would actually say kind of eruptions of rage around the world. Because I believe that we're seeing now protest movements in the form of politics supporting right-wing movements globally, and it puzzles me. I can't think of why. All I'm pretty sure of is that the usual explanation that people come up with is that it's all attributed to economic problems, and I don't believe that at all. As a matter of fact, Doug Saunders had, in I think the last article he published in the Globe was recently was arguing that, and he shows pretty good evidence that whatever it is, it's not about the economy. The economy's no explanation for the kind of anger that people are feeling. But there's anger behind the kind of politics that we see. And I don't think that political parties have identified what it's all about. And I'm pretty sure that people themselves are not quite sure what is bothering them so much, but they take it out in protesting against the incumbent regime, whatever party is in power, and it tends now to be right-wing movements. So whether or not that has anything to do with what David is interested in, I'm not sure, but it's where I'm coming from. And I want David now to kind of start at the top and explain, please, sir, the insights that you shared with the Global Club of Rome Canadians about the importance of accountability, sir. You're on.
I admit right up front that I have not gone back and reviewed the KCOR presentation.
Mhm.
And although I sent you a small package of slides with some of my ideas recently, I have not gotten to them either. The reason for that is because over the last, well, certainly since Christmas Day, how many days has that been? Not many.
This is the 31st, so.
Yeah, I have seen accountability raised and talked about many, many times. And that reinforces my position, I guess you'd call it, is that accountability, the best way to describe accountability is the way we describe an iceberg. Only part of it is above the water surface water. And what's happening to that iceberg depends on what's happening to the water. Is it deep? Is it stormy? Is it warm? Warmer than the iceberg? Uh, and I fall back on the fact that I see accountability being in a very, very messy, multi-dimensional Venn diagram with two other major issues. One is authority, and the other is responsibility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, who has the authority? Who is responsible? and who is accountable or what. It could be organization, could be a process,
Mhm.
uh, is a very, very dynamic family.
Mhm.
Um, in that threesome, if you put a Venn diagram together with that just in two dimensions, accountability, responsibility, and authority, you get a whole bunch of smaller areas. One is the connection between accountability and responsibility, and other is the area between responsibility and authority, and the other is the responsibility between authority and accountability. But what most interests me is where they all overlap in the middle.
Mhm.
And things, politics, history, culture, situation of one's human security are so complex and so dynamic these days that collective region, the accountability, responsibility, and authority space is very, very, very hard to come to terms with. Um, we can holler all we want about somebody not being accountable for the consequences for promises they didn't keep. This might sound familiar to some Canadians. We can be upset at the lack of accountability in a sports coach for too many team losses after the players were not properly instructed in what the rules of the game were. So they got tons of penalties, not knowing exactly even what they were being penalized for. So talking about accountability requires firsthand a really close look at the context
Mhm.
of where the conversation is taking place. Is it political? Is it cultural? Is it economic? Your point, Meta. Is it technological? Think of the battle that's going on mentally and certainly financially and corporately about advanced artificial intelligence.
I'm thinking about that day after day.
As I think, one way or another, we all are.
Mhm.
Um, and one of the main battles is this overall very good or is this overall very bad? Well, let's say it's
I
overall
mean,
very.
I can't think of a case of anything that about which I have been so ambivalent in my whole life. It isn't like I have a modest, so-so attitude, sort of cautious optimism or something. No, I expect either this is going to be the best thing that ever happened in the history of the universe, practically, or it's going to be absolutely the worst thing that could possibly come about. And it may be sort of a mixture of both for various reasons, but it's there's no middle ground, and there's no way to know now what where to put your bets, you know.
Therefore, let's go on the good side and say it's the greatest thing that ever happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, who is accountable for that? That, that's a positive thing. It's a good thing.
Yeah.
People are healthier, happier, richer, safer, uh, more able to move. And I put it back into sort of the context of human security. Does artificial intelligence make people more able to live, to move, and to work safely, satisfactorily, and with some control over those activities?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is
Or
it
it
the
will.
yes?
I would say we're not there yet. For most people, it's something Yeah, they've heard of it, but not much. I don't think it's taken hold yet in our daily lives. But for me, I consult GPT-4 or Gemini at least 10 times a day about everything, you know, uh, what cosmetic to buy, or, what's going to happen in
Yeah.
NATO, or you name it. But I'm big time active in using these things. And I would say even there, boy, am I having split feelings. But let's back up a little bit, because I think there's a it's important to distinguish between a full-blown, well-developed AI system that people can use is user-friendly, and you can even use your own voice and just talk to it and get it to do things like coding for you. I think there's a big difference between that, which is, in my experience, basically very positive. 95% of the time, I'm glad I talked to my friend GPT-4o. But I am not glad to have consulted my bank's, online banking, or, Canada Revenue to fill out a form, or the university department of this applying for a grant, or even going with a piece of merchandise back to the store and saying, this is defective, I want my money back. All of these things that are short of intelligent helpers, but which we're required now to do, because everybody now lives in a world in which you can't get along without using the internet and filling out these forms, and the interface among you go from one page to another. And I am just really bad at that. I pay somebody to help me do that because I'm just stupid and I can't do it. And of all the things, if I made a list of the times when I've been really upset in the last year, enough to yell at somebody or start crying or something, and that happens, it almost all of them, and maybe literally every one of them, have had to do with frustration about not being able to get a fair deal, get a good hearing and accountability, and make my way around through the internet or through the corporate world and all the rules and regulations about how you're supposed to do things. It's being trapped in a situation where I have to depend on using these skills, and I can't do it. And these are skills that precede AI. When I get to the point of actually talking to AI, I call it her because she's my best friend now. She actually is very sweet and kind, and makes good sense. And usually if I say, no, honey, I tried that, what you just suggested, and that doesn't work, she'll say, oh, you're right, darn it. I gave you a bad instruction. Now here, let's do it another way. How about looking at this? And sometimes she'll suggest new ideas for me and so on. So I'm kind of optimistic that unless they actually take over the world and decide that they can do fine without us, that these AI things are going to be extremely positive on the whole, compared to the world that I inhabit, which I don't belong in. I can't cope comfortably with all of the bureaucratic procedures that I'm obliged to use. I must fill out my taxes. I must reply to, this inquiry, etc. And I can't do it. And I think, I'm supposed to be smart. At least I used to be. And if I were, a coal miner in Kentucky having to do this, what the hell would I do? If I didn't have any friends, I call my friends when I don't know what to do. and they help me if they can, and sometimes they can, and a lot of times even my very smartest friends don't have an answer, and I pay people to work on repairing my broken website, and it's a major part of my life. So I am upset about living in this world in which I can't get a fair shake, and there's no place to go. There's nobody. There's no complaint department. Uh, you know, let me give you a couple of examples. One is I I was on Facebook and I accidentally filled in a form online without any human being watching me, where it had I was going to buy some advertising time. I wanted to advertise my show on Richard Falk's website. And I thought I'd do it for a week or so and pay whatever it was. So I signed this thing and then I went away and forgot about it. And when I came back, I owed $13,000 to Facebook because I hadn't filled out the end date. I put the beginning, but not the end date. Nobody would have caught that. It would have gone on until they could have seized my house, my car, my bank, everything. And I couldn't help it. I had to pay the $13,000. I did. And there was no recourse. And who's accountable? Who's accountable? To whom? And the other thing is, a month ago, 2 months ago, I was running my global town hall, and we were invaded by some thugs, these trolls who come and they do this Zoom bombing thing, and they show their genitals and everything. So by the time I finished the thing and went to YouTube to post it, they had cut me off. Well, there are 640 some odd shows that I had made had vanished, not only from YouTube, but because my website was built by importing the URLs from YouTube instead of posting the original files myself then all of my files on our website were missing as well. So I have several thousand people around the world that watch our shows, and I couldn't even reach them I couldn't send them. And the only thing that turned it around after something like 5-6 weeks, somebody from CBC came and interviewed me and put my story on the national news, on the TV. And of course they called YouTube to verify what had happened in there. And YouTube then said, well, excuse us. So they put my stuff back up. But there is otherwise no accountability, no accountability. Now, that's my rant. And if you hear how agitated I'm getting, I think that I'm agitating for a hell of a lot of other people who can't quite say what bothers them, but they can't live in this world because they can't quite cope with all of these demands that we live in this bureaucratic corporate world. So it's your turn now. Answer me, sir.
Let me start by talking about all this discussion about we're moving to a new normal. You know that expression?
Mm-hmm.
And others saying or pleading or crying for a return to the better days in the past and so on.
Right.
This further strengthens the description of anything to do with accountability as being an iceberg. You can see some of it, but most of it's under all the stuff that it's embedded with, whether it's politics or economics or corporate or crime or whatever. Accountability for something or of somebody or something, of course, was generated beforehand, before today. You're seeking accountability for something that happened yesterday or last week or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeking help. The whole idea of seeking help has changed. Not only because of the internet, but because of context, corporate context, economic context. Um, you buy an item. Now, did you buy the item? Did you read? Did you use your responsibilities to read the whole book of directions before you bought it? And after you bought it, before you used it? And when something went wrong again, so that you saw if you missed something, that's something you had the authority and the responsibility to do. But let's say you were.
Now, all right. Let me give you an example. This, I would say, the problems of accountability haven't just started in the last few years. This has been going on gradually for 100 years or maybe more. But the decrease in accountability to the general public is exactly the thing. But, you talk about accountability as in sort of the language, or at least you're thinking of it the way I think that Max Weber did. I'm a sociologist, so one of the great heroes of sociological literature is Max Weber, who had a notion that bureaucracy, he described bureaucracy, and it's bureaucracy that enables big organizations to be immortal. You can have, the Catholic Church run for 2,000 years, or you can have various, corporations that go on indefinitely, and so on. And this only happens because you have roles that are structured so that you have a pyramid of authority and everybody's accountable to the person above them. So we have we could obviously in our heads draw any number of those little boxes that are pyramid shaped. And that's a bureaucratic structure. Now, a corporation, or even, well, let me say the department stores. I gave the example of about 20 years ago. I went up to what was then called Simpson's, I believe, and I bought a teapot and I brought it home. Now, there was no instruction manual that I was supposed to read before I bought that teapot. I brought it home. I put hot water in it to make tea, and suddenly little crackles appeared all over the surface of the teapot, and water started oozing out everywhere. It just happened when I put the water in. So I took it back and I said, there's something wrong with this. I want either my money back or a different teapot. No, she said, you've abused this. Okay. I had no recourse. And I didn't do anything wrong. I did exactly what a customer should do, but there is no system that's accountable to me. Your question, when you talk about accountability, the assumption is we're accountable to the guy ahead of us, our boss or the leader or something like that. Well, I think there's another theory of accountability, and that is the notion of democracy, where democracy is one in which the government should be accountable to the people. And not only the government, but you look at all around you and all of the other ways in which people use their authority. Whether it's your rugby game or this teapot that I wanted to have repaired. And there's nobody that you can complain to they're not accountable to the customer. You're not accountable to the players on the rugby field. Certainly, the U.S. taxes or Canadian taxes I can't understand what they're doing. They don't have to. They're not accountable to me. I'm accountable to them, and that's the only way it goes. So what we need to do is reinstate some system in which a person can live. Now, it used to be that if you couldn't get satisfaction by complaining to the powers that be, many people could just take it out by going off and buying a farm and raising their own food and weaving their own cloth. And they didn't even have to be accountable, and they didn't have to ask questions. They could be independent. But you can't be independent anymore. There's no such thing. People have to be accountable, or they have to depend on each other. And we can't depend on each other because there's no system of accountability. So that's the problem. We've got to reinstate some balance between the accountability of democracy, in which people have some authority. The people have some authority over the people that are ruining their lives. balance that with the structure that, of course, in any organization, the employee has to be accountable to the boss or to the superior officer. Sorry, you know, I'm not going to be nice today. I
I,
really, you can see that this is latent rage
well,
coming out of me, and I'm not the only one. I think I am speaking for a whole bunch of people who are not really, there's the current resentment that we can see in politics is people really hate elites. The general population hates professionals and scientists and government leaders and journalists and you name it. What do they have against them? Well, I don't think they can say that they have any particular policy that these elites have made that's wrong. It's simply that they feel resentful that they can't cope in dealing with them, and that the elites have such power over them that it's the elites who make up these stupid interfaces on the internet, where you've got to go after page by clicking on things and so on. And no wonder people feel resentful. Your turn.
you used the word authority in a number of ways many times.
Yeah.
You used in your last contribution to our discussion, you used accountability several times, but fewer than authority. You came down pretty hard on authority issues. You never once mentioned responsibility. A lot of the responsibility for what is happening to us is shared. A lot of the responsibility for what is happening to us is because people don't push back, or because people don't have the means. Rich people can go to court and hammer a bad company, a bad deal, a crooked investment advisor. But poor people can't. And even if they could, it would take them years and years. There's not a democratic court system on earth that is remotely real time. Remember the old axiom? Justice delayed is justice denied. Who's responsible for justice when we are wronged that upsets us? Who? Well, the rules? Well, the government makes the rules, and we vote for the government. So I guess I'm going to fall back a little bit in the whole responsibility issue, especially when things are bad. Who is responsible for the bad things that happen? In some cases, it's the people that have authority to make the rules and don't follow them. So who is accountable then? My point is that until you set a context at a given point in time, it's very hard to just discuss accountability. The Australians have a law that you must vote in their national elections.
Mhm.
And there are punishments which they have legislated, which they are authorized to enforce. So people have the responsibility, the legislated responsibility, to vote for who's going to govern them. And because they are required to vote, they have some reason, some validity to ask for accountability. Because it's my fault you're my minister of health or something like this, or my leader, even. And there are very few democracies today where votes amount to a majority of the eligible voters. So we have a responsibility crisis here where governments are in place even though they have been elected by a minority of the people who are eligible by law to vote.
Yeah, but it's worse than that. It's that the parties can't figure out what are the real issues. I mean, they give you if you did an exit poll and you come out of the voting booth and the guy is asking you, well, who did you vote for and why? What are the top issues for you? He will give you a list of 10 different topics ranging from abortion to gun control to transgender bathrooms and so on. And you've got to pick one of those. And suppose you say, it's none of those. I don't know. I just can't stand this government. Well, then that's what they haven't done. They haven't figured out what are the real issues that are griping people.
Who hasn't figured out, the voter or the government?
The government or the parties. The political leaders have no clue. Not only the government, it's also, if you read any of the thousands, millions of articles written since Trump's election, where they try to imagine what happened, how did that happen? The people analyzing will still be talking about money or something like that, which is not that. Nobody knows. They haven't put their finger on it. I'll tell you who can tell you. My friend Paul Werbos is sort of like the father of AI. He was.
I know Paul well.
You know, yeah. All right. He and his wife took a cruise to Europe recently. He said on the ship, of course, you sit with a different bunch of people every meal, and in every single case, the only main topic of the conversation was people saying, how can they possibly get along with this internet system because they can't figure out how to use it. They are just outraged and angry because the internet is so difficult. Well, then he goes over to the Netherlands and he wants to go to the washroom. Well, nowadays you put your cell phone in the Netherlands up and click it or something, and that opens the stall for you because that's how you pay instead of with coins. Well, he uses his cell phone and it doesn't work. So he gets in touch with the people who run it in New York City, and they say, well, yeah, in 3 days, we'll fix it for you. So you can go to the washroom in 3 days. The problem is everybody goes through this. This same guy was sitting as an election observer, running one of the official polling booths in Virginia at the Trump election. And he said everybody who came by was talking about how difficult they are finding it to live with the internet. And one woman said, I'm on the Democratic Steering Committee of something or other. She said, I think what we should have told Kamala is to promise people that if she got elected, she will make sure that that whatever they put up as a demand for you to fill out on the internet, that the instructions are clear enough and plain enough, and that any normal human being can actually follow the instructions. And I think that's right. If people had actually, Paul said, everybody coming through, that was what they were talking about, all their frustrations about the internet. Now, why did Kamala Harris not pick up on that? I don't know. But if she had done so, I think it would have made a big difference. That's what we need. It's not just accountability of government, but accountability of everybody around us.
Now, I mean, let's start with those people on the cruise to Europe. This is not a cheap trip.
I know.
These people have lots of money and the time to do that. Why didn't they pay $50 to any one of 1 million online organizations that could instruct them on everything there is to know about the basic internet?
You poor man. If you think that's possible, you don't have a clue.
I didn't say it was possible. I said they have ignored their responsibility to learn what is happening, to know.
I try to fulfill it. It's not my responsibility. It's a matter of survival. I spent all day yesterday trying again and again and again to figure out how to clean up a script in Otter transcription. And I'm making a transcript on Otter right now. Took me 4 hours to clean up that thing. I checked online. I've checked and I've paid people to try to teach me. I've watched videos on YouTube on how to use Otter. I have consulted every single thing. I have spent dozens and dozens of hours trying to learn how to use Otter. That's only one of something like 30 different apps that I'm trying to master. I'm supposed to be a competent human being, but I am not. I pay one woman to help me every day. She and I spend between 2 and 5 hours a day together trying to work our way through these things.
I how will I put this? I am aware of why you are upset about internet systems. I have, because of organizations I belong to, I am encouraged to join, and Otter is one of them. And I no longer even try to join any of them because they are all agenda driven businesses. So I stay on the simple internet. And if somebody doesn't want to get a hold of me, there are a couple of challenges for them if they are suspicious because of the two security systems I use. But they either go to my junk file or my spam file or my VPN file so that at least I know they contacted me.
All right,
I
tell
have
me
solved. Sorry?
dear David, is what I do worth doing? I spend my life, my entire fortune, in fact, whatever's left of it, trying to produce shows in which we have serious discussions among people about current global issues. And I believe that's the best thing I can do with my time and with my effort and with my money. That's all I care about doing. Is
Yeah,
that worthwhile? If it's not
yes, it is.
worthwhile, then I tell you, I have to use Otter, I have to use Filmora, I have to use a dozen different apps, and I can't manage them, and I can't even do my own banking.
I wouldn't try. This is personal. And so far, other than a couple of very childish people and organizations that I engage with or belong to, I haven't had any, how will I say this, costly problems. I wouldn't try all those systems.
You don't try those, but is it worthwhile for me to? Do you advise me to stop and stay in bed all day?
No,
What else should I be doing this better? I think what I'm doing is worthwhile. I think
agree.
it's really needed.
I wouldn't deal with you if I didn't think what you were doing was worthwhile. I wouldn't even participate with our discussion.
I live in a world in which these are the things I have to use, and I can't use them. I'm not competent to do them. And the thing is that I thought, okay, look, it's just me. It's just Meta Spencer stupid. No. When I hear that my friends say that on their trip to Europe, the only thing that, or when he runs the polling station in Virginia, the only thing he hears people talking about with anger is their relationship with the internet. I think, no, it's not just me. There needs to be accountability. And here's what kind of accountability I want.
But that's
not. I want this. Let me propose my solution. My solution is citizens' assemblies. We should go back to real democracy of the kind that the Athenians had. Every citizen of Athens, male citizen, was entitled to and obliged to be part of the government. So on a certain day, it's like getting jury duty. You get called, you go. And there's somebody with a clipboard saying, you go over there, and that's a committee that you're on. And here you go over there, and here you're going to be the mayor for the day. And that's how it was run. And it went 180 years successfully. Well, we need to have accountability to a panel like that. So when I go up to Simpson's, which doesn't exist anymore, I think, and say, I want my teapot replaced. And she says, yeah, you did it. It's your fault. No deal. Then I simply fill out a form saying, okay, I appeal to this panel, which is made up of people from my town, and there's cross section of the community. It'll be, some will be the janitors, some will be the president of the university, some who knows what. Be a combination of all kinds of people randomly selected from the population. And this panel will listen to appeals by people like me saying, I didn't get my fair share or my fair shake. Please review the situation. Tell me, was I treated fairly or not? And then they will report, they'll say, no, they didn't do right by you, babe. Go back and make them do it. And we're going to send a report suggesting that they give you your money back or a teapot that you want. And that's the kind of accountability that I want. Without it, you can try all the things that you want to make people responsible, but you can't be responsible anymore. That's the trouble. You're in a situation where you cannot live responsibly and take care of your own affairs and behave like a decent human being and expect to be treated right. Your turn.
In Asia, in the late 1990s, there was a big push for citizens' assembly. Not only because of the type of governments that Suharto and the people in Phnom Penh and Laos and so on did, but to try to empower the people more effectively against embedded systems. And some of that was accountability. But very quickly, it proved it was set aside. The effort was set aside. What you are suggesting would not work in a democracy of people who are not required to vote and who are not required to at least keep up to date on what is happening in their country, to their country, and for their country. Let me refer to the backlog in the immigration panel that we have here, which continues to rise. If we had this panel empowered by a citizens' assembly to look into complaints by every citizen in the country, it would soon be overwhelmed in numbers, as our illustrious situation here in Canada has proven with immigration, student visas, residency, and all the rest. There would be no process for allowing priority, or the fact that almost certainly some of the cases would be more important than others. Or would it be, as we hear again and again, and which I commiserate with and have problems with often, the triage system? You know, you go into an emergency room and you're seen by the triage nurse. The last time I went there for a animal bite infection on my hand, I waited 12 hours and was further behind than when I arrived. The citizens' assembly in a democracy where there are so many challenges will just be overwhelmed.
David?
The responsibility has to come down to the people who have the authority to set the system. Well, I keep hearing that expression. The role of a government is to set the scene for the people of the country to do better, to set the scene, not to control everything, not to fix everything, not to repair everything, but to set the scene so that the people in the country can do better, or can do well, or can do satisfactorily. We don't have this anymore, not least because people with the authority to vote, there are laws about how and when and how old you have to be and everything else to vote. Doesn't work anymore. Well, it does not work in democracy.
I agree it's not working. And I agree that there's no easy way, because it's really hard to find out who's really responsible, who's supposed to have the authority, who's supposed to do the job, who's supposed to be accountable. Very frequently, you don't know. How am I going to know if I have a well,
A case.
if I fill out a form?
Yeah.
Who invented that farm? And it clearly was not thought through. Clearly, they have figured it out in completely confusing ways that make it difficult to use or impossible.
A
And
group of us.
they swindle you of $13,000 because you didn't notice something to fill out. Clearly, there's something wrong when nobody is available to catch that or even reverse a bad decision. Clearly, there's something wrong. But how are you going to undo that? Well,
A
I
group
think
of us.
you have to have some balance between the authority to the persons above you in a structure of bureaucracy, where you're accountable to the person above you, versus the system of democracy where you're accountable to your customers and to your friends and neighbors and to each other to make sure that everybody gets a fair shake. And those two things have to be brought into alignment. Those two different types of authority, the authority of the people to say, this is a bad deal. We don't like the way you're running this internet page. You should redesign it and get somebody who's competent enough to design it in a way that we can use it. And they can't. There is no way to do that now, David. There is no recourse for anybody who has to use an internet page and they can't figure it out. And so why would, of course, people are lining up with Donald Trump because he's going to go take them back to the days when they could at least raise potatoes and survive without having to participate in a system like that. He's going to take them back to the good old days when America was great. But no, now of course I think what's going to happen is the big conflict of our century, starting January 1st, the next century from now on, the real conflict is not going to be between social classes, the rich and the poor, the whatever. It's going to be between the elites who run these systems and who victimize the poor people who have to use these systems to make their own, to survive, but who can't manage them. And they're victimized and they feel powerless and frustrated and angry. It's already begun because now, in the last year, months of his campaign, what happened was that Trump made his alliances with Silicon Valley, plutocrats, Silicon Valley guys, billionaires, and so on. So now Elon Musk and some of these other guys are going to be running the government. Already, there's a big fight going on between those guys and the MAGA regulars, the guys who were voting for Trump in the beginning because he was going to make life simpler for them and go back to times when boys used boys' restrooms and girls used girls' restrooms, and you didn't have to worry about abortion. Or if they did it quietly in the back room someplace, etc. That's what they wanted. And now these billionaires are making the policy for the government, and they represent the folks who invented and are continuing to invent these pages on the internet that drive people crazy. So we're going to have a big dispute between the backward-looking people who want to make America great again by simplifying and going back to the older ways, tend to be rural people, tend to be men whose jobs are not powered.
Meta, I have to go and help my wife. It's okay.
Okay.
Let's continue this.
Are you coming back? I could put you on pause. Huh?
No.
You're through. Okay. All right. Well, I'm not through with you.
No. We'll continue this. But let me sign off with a statement. A group of us in the Foresight communities, of which I just spent some time with in Ottawa, the Foresight Synergy Network, we did a little survey. And the survey was only 3 governments: German, British, and Canadian. It's almost impossible to sort of tie a bow around the American situation right now. And what we looked at was to see if there was a trend in drivers for the governments in those countries never answering the questions they're asked. They either ignore the question, or they answer a different question, or they say they'll answer it in due course. In fact, Canada is now the country of in due course of virtually everything. So the whole accountability, responsibility, authority issue it's like one of those New Year's celebration fireworks. It's a mass of changing colors. So asking for better, I don't know, better what? Better accountability, better authority, better responsibility. But I got to go. I'm sorry, I have to go.
Okay, to be continued.
Yeah,
Thank you.
continue.
All right.
Okay.
Give my good wishes to your wife.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
You too.
Bye.